The first sign that something was wrong came in silence. Not a loud crash. Not a message. Not even static. Just nothing. For 3 days, Earth's long-range deep space arrays picked up no transmissions from the Arcadia colony. No signals. No pulses. Not even background radiation where there should have been a heartbeat of civilization humming through space. Colonies didn't just go dark. At first, they thought it was a tech failure. Some relay fried in a solar storm or one of the network drones malfunctioned. But by the second day, entire science teams were running simulations and rechecking every line of code. Nothing was broken. The systems were fine. By day 3, panic set in. Commander Holt stood at the edge of the observation deck, hands locked behind his back, eyes fixed on the stars. He didn't blink much anymore. He just stared like he was waiting for something to jump out of the dark. "I know that look," said Captain Reeves, stepping beside him. "You think they're gone?" Holt didn't answer right away. He just kept staring out as if the black would eventually give him the answer no one else could. "I think," he said, voice low, "that something's coming. And we're not ready." They'd all heard the old stories. Before humans broke into the stars, there were whispers, alien species, dead civilizations, signals we never translated. But none of it was ever proven. The galaxy, as far as they knew, had been silent. Empty. Until Arcadia. The colony was more than just a distant outpost. It was humanity's flag planted at the edge of known space. A symbol. A challenge. And now it was gone. The Emergency Council met that evening, underground in a chamber built during the early war days, a leftover from when humanity still thought nukes would be the end of them. It smelled of dust and metal. No one joked anymore about old bunkers. "2 scout ships dispatched," said a woman from the Exploration Bureau. "Both vanished. No contact. Same path. Same result." A murmur rippled across the room. "Vanished how?" someone asked. "We don't know. No distress calls. They just stop." The council fell into a tense silence. A man in a wrinkled coat leaned forward. He was older, ex-military. The way he stared reminded people of a man who'd seen cities burn. "What if this isn't just a failure?" he asked. "What if someone's testing us?" He let that hang in the air. Testing us. The word echoed louder than any of them liked. Back in the observation tower, Commander Holt moved like a man whose nerves were coiled too tight. He didn't trust silence anymore. Silence meant something was watching. When the third colony dropped off the grid, no one called it a coincidence. There were no meetings. No discussions. Just movement. War protocols activated. Satellites repositioned. Sleeper fleets awoke from orbiting slumber. Earth hadn't mobilized like this since the last global conflict, the one that nearly tore the planet apart. But this time, it wasn't humans they were preparing to fight. This time they didn't even know what they were facing. The ship was called Resolute, an older military vessel retrofitted after the war. It wasn't the fastest, but it was tough. The kind of ship that didn't flinch when the void pushed back. Inside, the crew prepped in near silence. The mission was simple: get to Arcadia. Find out what happened. Don't engage unless necessary. The truth was, no one expected them to come back. Not even the crew. Among them was Corporal Deeren, a communications officer. Young. Bright. A little too curious for his own good. He wasn't a soldier in the traditional sense. More like a linguist who'd learned to hold a gun. He was the first to notice the noise. It was faint, buried deep in background static. Almost like a whisper. He played it back 3 times before calling anyone. Lieutenant Carr was the one who listened with him. "What do you hear?" she asked, her face unreadable. He hesitated. "It's not human." She didn't laugh. Didn't even raise an eyebrow. They both knew what that meant. They isolated the frequency, filtered out distortion, cleaned the signal. The sound was clearer now. And it was screaming. Something was crying out in the dark. Not words, just raw sound. Rage. Despair. Warning. Or a trap. 3 hours later, the ship dropped out of warp near the Arcadia system. What they saw wasn't a battlefield. It was a massacre. The colony wasn't just destroyed, it was erased. Buildings melted into slag. Orbiting satellites turned to ash. Even the moons had scars like something had clawed across them. There were no bodies. Just shadows burned into metal walls. Ghosts. The captain didn't speak. He just stood there frozen. The Resolute scanners picked up something drifting near the far edge of the system. A structure. Massive. It looked almost organic, like bone fused with metal. "That's not one of ours," whispered the navigator. They approached carefully. Too late. Without warning, the ship's systems went blind. Engines died. Lights flickered. They drifted helplessly, dead in space. Then the voice came. It didn't speak in words. Not at first. It felt like pressure in the skull. A weight behind the eyes. A presence. Watching. Judging. Then came the message. You are lesser. You trespass. You will kneel. Silence followed. Diren's hands trembled as he looked around the dark control room. No one spoke. The captain finally broke the silence. We're not bowing to anything. The light surged back. Systems rebooted. The ship groaned as if it had just been released from something's grip. They turned back toward Earth. And that was when they saw it. The stars behind them were wrong. Shifted. The Resolute wasn't where it should have been. They had been moved. Something had reached into the fabric of space and placed them somewhere else. Not just another system. Another corner of the galaxy. A warning. A challenge. Or maybe a leash. The crew sat in stunned silence. No one knew what to do. What to say. Then Diren, still staring at the frozen console, whispered something no one wanted to hear. They let us go. The implications were worse than death. Earth received the transmission 3 days later. It wasn't words. Just an image. A symbol carved into the metal remains of Arcadia's capital dome. A circle broken by a slash. Alien but now unmistakably meant for them. The message was clear. You will kneel. And in that moment, everything changed. The government stopped bickering. Nations stopped fighting. Old wounds were stitched shut almost overnight. Because for the first time it wasn't just Earth in danger. It was us. All of us. Humanity. And humanity bows to no one. The first council to unite all human nations wasn't called in peace. It was called in fear. Leaders, scientists, former enemies, they gathered in an underground chamber sealed so deep it hadn't been touched in 50 years. The air was cold. The tension colder. No one smiled. Not even the usual diplomats. Because they all saw the image. They all saw what was left of Arcadia. And they all knew one thing now. They were not alone. The room fell into silence when the door opened and Commander Holt walked in. He didn't waste time with greetings. He dropped a data drive onto the center table and spoke clearly. They sent us a message, he said. And we're going to answer it. A few murmurs. 1 or 2 nervous looks. They didn't kill our ship, Holt continued. They wanted us to know. They want us afraid. To show we're weak. To break us before we even stand. He paused. His voice dropped lower. But they don't know us. There was something in his voice. A steel edge. Something not everyone in that room had. But something all of humanity used to carry. Back when they scraped survival out of ash. We don't kneel. Not to kings. Not to gods. And not to them. No one clapped. But the silence that followed wasn't doubt anymore. It was resolve. Diren sat alone in the barracks long after the others had gone. He couldn't sleep. Couldn't stop hearing it, that voice in his skull. Not words anymore but a presence. A weight. He remembered his mother once told him that fear was useful. That it wasn't meant to stop you. Just remind you that something matters. Right now, fear was all he had. He glanced at the edge of the table. His hand reached into his pocket and pulled out a scrap of metal he'd snuck from the wreckage at Arcadia. Burnt, cracked, but etched with something, half-melted numbers. Coordinates. He hadn't told anyone yet. Not even the captain. Because the moment he saw them, something deep in his gut whispered that this wasn't over. That the voice wasn't done. That this was just the beginning. Outside the sky was clear. Too clear. Diren looked up and the stars didn't feel like stars anymore. They felt like eyes. The fleet didn't launch all at once. It moved in silence, cloaked in shadows, through gravity wells and folded space. Not all of Earth's defenses were public knowledge. Some had been buried so deep even governments forgot they existed. But now they were waking up. AI-piloted carriers, sleeper mechs buried under Mars soil, old black-budget ships without names or records. They'd been built in fear of each other. Now, they were all that stood between extinction and something worse. The high-orbit command platform, codenamed Cairn, watched them all go. Its systems tracked every ship, every path, every echo in the void. Its lead officer, a weathered man named Reese, stood silently with a mug of cold coffee. He never touched it, just stared at the departure logs. These aren't soldiers, said his second-in-command quietly. Most of them, they signed up last week. Reese didn't move. They won't be soldiers until they survive a war. And if they don't? Then we'll remind whatever's out there what happens when you back humanity into a corner. They called it the fracture. A rift in space somewhere beyond what maps called known. A tear, pulsing with energy invisible to most scanners. But it was real. Duran saw it with his own eyes, felt it in his teeth. And it was there, just beyond that fracture, that something waited. Not ships. Not machines. Something older. The scout team sent to investigate didn't return. Not dead. Just gone. Even the black box stopped mid-recording. One moment it was there. The next, empty silence. No explosion. No warning. Just erasure. Duran stared at the mission feed with his jaw clenched. "They're not killing us," he said quietly. The captain turned. "They're unmaking us." The words hit harder than they should have. Because it meant this wasn't a war. It was cleansing. And humanity? Humanity had been marked. Earth's defenses bristled. For the first time in decades, the planet acted like it remembered how to fight. Factories roared. Orbital rings lit up. The moon's dark side gleamed with weapons too dangerous to leave anywhere else. And far above, just outside the asteroid belt, ships began to vanish. Not all at once. Not in battle. Just gone. Every ship that got close to the fracture disappeared. No traces. No wreckage. It was like the universe was quietly swallowing them. And no one knew how to stop it. 3 weeks passed. And then, for the first time since Arcadia, a voice returned. Not human. It came through every device, every screen, every transmission frequency. One word, repeated again and again. Submit. People froze in their homes. Workplaces fell silent. Even prisons stopped moving. It wasn't loud. It wasn't cruel. It was calm. Like a doctor explaining a terminal diagnosis. Like the cold whisper of inevitability. Submit. And in the streets of every city, people asked the question aloud, in frightened voices. What if we can't win? And others answered. Then we fight anyway. Because that's the thing about humans. They're not brave because they don't feel fear. They're brave because they fight despite it. And something out there was about to learn what that really meant. The voice didn't stop. Every 12 hours it repeated the same word. Submit. It didn't explain. Didn't threaten. It just said it, like a countdown without numbers. Like it already knew the outcome. The world started to fracture in its own way. Not physically but mentally. Some people fell quiet, staring blankly at the skies. Others raged. Screamed into empty rooms. A few even tried to answer the voice, begged it for reason, for peace. No answer ever came back. Just silence. And then, hours later, submit. The worst part? The voice didn't feel angry. It felt sad. Like it already mourned what it would have to do next. Captain Oren walked through the main hangar of the Red Warden, the largest human-built warship in orbit. Even now, with all the new tech, the old bolts and scars from past battles were still visible along the hull. The ship had a history. It had survived things it shouldn't have. And right now, it was humanity's last spear. The crew was tired. Some hadn't slept in days. But they kept moving. Kept working. Kept fighting like they still had a chance. Duran stood at one of the interface stations, running diagnostics for the 1000th time. His eyes were hollow but his hands didn't shake. "You all right?" the captain asked. Duran hesitated. Then shook his head. "No, sir." "Good," Oren said. "Means you still feel it. Don't lose that. Fear's just another sense. Use it." Back on Earth, something strange happened. Children started drawing things. Unprompted. Swirls, eyes, stars bleeding into each other. Dark shapes beneath skies. Half-ships that weren't quite machines. Some parents laughed it off. Others didn't. Especially when the kids started speaking in words they didn't understand. Not alien. Not gibberish. Old words. Forgotten languages. Some of which hadn't been spoken in thousands of years. And some that didn't exist at all. Scientists began recording the patterns. Priests tried to bless the drawings. Psychologists called it mass hysteria. But the children didn't seem afraid. Only sad. As if they'd already seen what was coming. As if they'd already accepted it. In the deep black, near the edge of the fracture, one human ship refused to turn back. The Vigilant Sparrow. A stealth recon vessel, retrofitted with a gravitic engine so new it wasn't even listed in the official fleet records. On board, for crew members each chosen for one reason, they'd volunteered for a one-way mission. They knew they wouldn't return. The plan wasn't survival. It was knowledge. They crossed the edge. They vanished. But one signal, weak, corrupted, leaked through before everything cut off. A final message. For seconds long. A whisper from a man whose name would be remembered only as that voice in the dark. They were human, once. Then silence. The second global blackout lasted 4 hours. Satellites dropped offline. Space stations flickered. Communications across continents froze. No warhead. No explosion. Just a pause in reality. When power came back, so did the voice. But this time it said something new. You were like us. And for the first time it sounded uncertain. As if maybe it wasn't sure anymore. As if it had seen something it didn't expect. Something it had forgotten. Underground, in a bunker beneath the Arctic ice shelf, a team of specialists gathered around a glowing display. The data they'd received from the Vigilant Sparrow was corrupted, but not gone. Bits of footage, fragments of audio, and one still image, a corridor made of bone, lights that bled, and a figure, tall, hunched, its face covered in what looked like human skin stretched thin over metal. But it wasn't the figure that terrified them. It was what was behind it. A wall, covered in symbols. And each symbol matched something found in Earth's ancient ruins. From civilizations that never touched each other. From cultures separated by oceans and millennia. And all of them had drawn the same shapes. The same warnings. Humanity hadn't just been found. It had been watched. For a very, very long time. Diren stared out the viewport of the Red Warden, watching stars shimmer as they prepared for another jump. He couldn't stop shaking. Not from fear but something else. A pulse. A hum in his bones, like his body remembered something his mind didn't. You feel it too, said the captain beside him. Diren nodded slowly. Like we're standing on a cliff, he whispered. And something's reaching up from below. Captain Oren didn't answer. He didn't have to. They were all thinking the same thing. This wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about truth. About whatever had shaped them. Watched them. Maybe even created them. And why now it wanted them gone. When the next message came, it shook the world. Every screen, every mind, every sleeping dream filled with a vision. A planet, burning. Screaming voices. Oceans boiling. Stars cracking. And one word written in fire. Obey. Diren woke screaming. So did millions of others. It wasn't a warning. It was a promise. And for the first time, even the bravest among them felt doubt. What do you do when your enemy isn't just stronger, but ancient, and patient, and maybe even responsible for you? But here's the thing. Humans don't break the way others do. They bend. They bleed. They fall. But then they build. Again and again and again. And now, something out there was about to find out. Just because you made something doesn't mean you can control it forever. And humanity? It had just remembered who it was. The voice didn't speak for 3 days. Not a sound. Not even a hum. It was like the universe itself had taken a breath and forgotten how to exhale. Some people hoped that meant it was gone. Others knew better. Silence was never safety. It was waiting. In that pause, the world changed again. Not in big, loud ways. In small ones. The kind that ripple quietly and shape everything later. In rural towns, strange growths appeared in the ground, metallic roots that shimmered like oil under the sun. They didn't move. Didn't spread. But they weren't natural. Scientists tried to dig one out. It melted their tools without heat. Then it vanished. One boy, just 12, leaned close to one and said it whispered to him. Not in words. In feelings. It didn't make sense. He couldn't explain. He just cried afterward. In the cities, more people began hearing things. Not the voice. Different ones. Echoes of memories that weren't theirs. Images of battles fought in skies with 3 moons. A woman in New York woke up speaking a language no one could identify, one that didn't match any known pattern. She couldn't stop. Not even to eat. They took her to a lab. She died 3 hours later. Her last words were in English. It remembers us. Back aboard the Red Warden, Diren sat in the observation deck, watching the vast emptiness stretch in all directions. The stars looked normal. But they weren't. Not really. He'd grown up with these constellations. Could name them all. But now the patterns felt wrong, like someone had rearranged the night when no one was looking. Captain Oren joined him in silence. Neither said a word for minutes. Do you think it made us? Diren asked. Oren exhaled slowly. I think it thinks it did. That's not the same thing. But what if it's right? Oren turned toward him, eyes sharp. Then it should have left us alone the moment we started asking questions. Across the stars, other ships moved. Human fleets had scattered to the corners of charted space, trying to find answers. Trying to find origins. Trying to survive. Most didn't come back. One, the Horizon Echo, returned after 9 months. Half its crew were missing. The other half didn't speak. Not once. Their logs were corrupted. Their minds fractured. But all of them carried the same symbol burned into their skin. A circle with no beginning or end, split once down the center. That symbol began appearing in other places. etched into old ruins, scratched into ancient trees, even burned into a glacier that had never been touched by human hands. It meant something, but no one could say what. In hidden research stations, a small team of linguists and historians tried to trace it. They found pieces of it in cave paintings from 20,000 years ago, buried in old tablets from dead empires, even hidden in the background of early digital signals sent during the first space flights. It had always been there, waiting. Theories exploded. Maybe humanity was seeded, planted, watched like a test. Or maybe Earth wasn't the beginning. Maybe it was the restart. One researcher went mad trying to prove it. She swore she found a signal buried in the DNA of every human. A rhythm. A code. But before she could publish anything, her lab went dark. By the time investigators arrived, it had been sterilized. Erased. Not a single cell left to test. Not even hers. They said it was an accident. No one believed them. Meanwhile, the voice returned. Not through screens. Through dreams. People started waking with blood dripping from their ears, their eyes wide with horror. They didn't remember details. Just one thing being watched. Not in anger. In disappointment. Like something had expected better. And then came the sleepwalkers. They moved in groups, silent. Cross cities. Roads. Oceans. On foot. No food. No water. Just walking. Always toward the same place. A dead crater in the middle of the Sahara Desert. When satellites looked closer, they saw something beneath the sand. A structure. Round. Too large to be natural. And definitely not human-made. Drones were sent. None came back. So they sent soldiers. They never reached the center. Something blocked them. Not a wall. Not a weapon. A feeling. One soldier described it before going catatonic. Like the universe screaming all at once, just for me. Back in orbit, ships began encountering gravitational distortions in places where space had always been stable. They were small, subtle. Like bruises under the fabric of reality. And in those distortions people saw things. Not with their eyes. With their minds. Images of worlds shattered. Of beings that were once human but changed. Twisted. Worshipping something. Or fleeing it. The word kept surfacing in the minds of the psychically sensitive. The returner. No one knew what it meant. But it filled people with dread. Even children stopped playing. Animals howled for no reason. The oceans grew warmer. The auroras bled red for weeks. On board the Red Warden, a new message came through. Not from the enemy. From another human ship. The Wandering Hope. A research vessel gone missing 3 years ago. The message was only audio. Corrupted. Crackled. But one voice made it through, broken and shaking. It lied to us. We weren't the experiment. We were the answer. The question was, what would we do when we found out? And then just static. Diran replayed that message 100 times. Every time it hit deeper. If they weren't the experiment, then the enemy wasn't testing them. It was afraid of what they might become. Captain Oren began sending coded messages across human outposts. Not commands. Warnings. Prepare for reclamation. People didn't know what that meant. But it spread like fire through the ranks. Soldiers whispered it. Civilians wrote it on walls. Engineers carved it into metal. It became a movement. Not to fight. To remember. Because if something out there was trying to erase them, they had to hold on to what they were. Not just humans. Free. Some began to rebel against fear. Started turning off their comms. Disabling listening devices. Shutting down anything that could be used against them. Not out of panic. Out of defiance. They started building again. New engines. New weapons. New shields. Not perfect. Not even reliable. But human. Rough. Real. Personal. They started naming their ships things like Defiant Soul, Never Again, No Master, and Memory of Fire. And the voice responded. This time it sounded different. It sounded angry. We gave you a path. You chose ruin. Asterisk asterisk. That message went out across the stars. Not just to humans. But to every species still listening. And for the first time, others started to notice something. Not all humans were scared. Some smiled. Because they weren't just being threatened. They were being underestimated. The voice didn't understand. Humans had always found meaning in darkness. In fire. In endings. And they never bowed. Not to kings. Not to gods. Not to fate. And not to whatever it was that now called itself their creator. As Diran stared out at the empty stars, he whispered a promise he didn't yet fully understand. We didn't come from you. We came from each other. And somewhere far away something cracked. A sound that wasn't sound. As if the universe had just blinked. And the real story was about to begin. The days that followed felt stretched, like time itself was stalling. Systems lagged without cause. Communications broke down without warning. Even clocks lost sync. Nothing moved right. Not in space. Not on Earth. And through it all, the dreams got worse. Now people didn't just wake up afraid. They screamed in their sleep. They hurt themselves trying to escape things only they could see. Entire outposts reported synchronized nightmares, everyone dreaming the same place. A long corridor carved in stone, with a single red light pulsing at the far end. No one ever made it to the light. On Mars, the terraforming dome started to crack. Not from pressure. From sound. Vibrations, deep and rhythmic, that pulsed from the ground like a slow heartbeat. Nothing beneath them. No fault lines. No tunnels. Just that sound repeating every 11 minutes. On Europa, a probe sent beneath the ice stopped transmitting. When the signal returned, it brought a single word. Run. Human leadership tried to stay calm. Tried to hold the pieces together. But fear spreads fast. Especially when no one can tell the truth. Not because they didn't want to. Because they didn't know it. The council fractured. Half wanted to go dark, to hide. The other half wanted to strike first. To send every weapon, every ship, every mind against whatever was coming. But no one could say what it was. Just that it was moving closer. A signal pulsed from the edge of the Kuiper belt. Nothing complex. Just a tone. Repeating every 17 seconds. When decrypted, it matched human brainwave patterns under stress. Somehow the signal was us. The Red Warden stayed at the edge, tracking things no one else could. Shadows moved across sectors where there should be nothing. Shapes not caught on sensors but seen with the naked eye. Big. Wrong. Like gaps in space pretending to be real. Diran watched them from the bridge, hand clenched tight around the railing. "We're not ready," he said. Oren didn't look away from the screen. "We were never meant to be. That's why we have to move." The crew of the Red Warden wasn't large. 43 humans trained to adapt, to survive, to push deeper than anyone before. And now they were the only ones close enough to intercept the next sign. An object was coming. Fast. Not a ship. Not a meteor. Just something that moved like it had a purpose. His path would take it right past Titan. And there, a research station had gone quiet 3 days ago. Oren gave the order. Set course. We meet it there. No one protested. Not because they weren't afraid, but because they were. And that fear was the reason to act. When the Red Warden reached Titan, they found the station intact. Lights on. Doors sealed. Systems running. But no people. Inside, every room looked like someone had just left. Meals half-eaten. Notes still fresh. Heat still lingering in coffee mugs. But not a single trace of movement. No DNA. No fingerprints. Like the people themselves had been erased from reality. Diran stepped into the main lab and froze. The symbol was there. Not just on the walls. On every screen. Every tablet. Even etched into the glass of the observation dome. He felt it before he saw it. A pressure in his head. Like something leaning in, trying to look through his thoughts. He didn't speak. Just turned to the others. It's here. Outside, in the orange haze of Titan's skies, the object arrived. It didn't land. It hovered. Perfectly still, a few kilometers above the surface. No heat. No signal. Just a cold presence, like a dead star watching from too close. They sent drones. The drones lost contact. They tried to scan it. The scans looped back nonsense, readings that contradicted the laws of physics. Then the ship shook. Every human on board felt it. Not in their bodies. In their memories. Flashes of things that hadn't happened yet. Screams in languages they didn't speak. A world burning in reverse. A hand reaching down from the sky, not to help, to claim. The voice returned. Not in words. In command. Return to your place. Kneel. Asterisk asterisk. The pressure increased. Lights flickered. Gravity stuttered. Bones ached under the weight of something trying to rewrite them. And then one of the crew, a technician named Willis, collapsed. He convulsed. Eyes wide. Hands clawing at his face. And when he opened his mouth, the voice came out. Not his. The other. You are echoes. Fragments. We are the whole. You belong to us. Asterisk asterisk. Then silence. Willis died with a smile. Oren gave the order to leave. But the engines didn't respond. The ship wouldn't move. The object outside had extended something. Not visible. But real. A tether. The crew began to change. Not physically. Mentally. They heard each other's thoughts. Finished each other's sentences. Knew things they shouldn't. Like they were being knitted into one mind. One memory. Oren slammed his fist on the console. No. We are not one. We choose who we are. Diren felt it too. The pull. The promise of peace. Of unity. Of never being alone again. But it was a lie. Because under the surface there was no freedom. Only silence. Only surrender. And humans had never done that well. Back on Earth, others were waking up. All over the planet people saw the same sky. Not with their eyes. With something deeper. A glimpse of what waited if they gave in. A galaxy scrubbed clean of noise. No rebellion. No laughter. No choice. Just order. Perfect. Cold. Unquestioned. The opposite of everything humanity was. And they started to resist. They shut down stations. Pulled power from networks. Isolated ships. Burned data hubs. Anything that could be used to listen. They started talking in code. In stories. In music. In ways the voice couldn't quite grasp. And they built. Something old. Something human. A signal of their own. A pulse that fought back. The Red Warden received it just before power failed. For words. Hold. Line. Together. Fire. Asterisk asterisk. Diren smiled through the pain. We're not alone. Outside the object moved. Not away. Closer. And below, the station on Titan lit up from within. Something was waking. Something buried deep under the ice. Older than the voice. Human. And angry. The ship groaned. Walls bent. Systems overloaded. The final moment was coming. They just had to hold on long enough to meet it. And maybe, for the first time in all of known existence, the galaxy would see the one truth it had never understood. Humanity bows to no one. The pressure reached its peak. The Red Warden's hull creaked like it was breathing its last. Lights dimmed to a blood-red glow. Alarms didn't scream anymore, they whimpered like they knew it was pointless. Outside, the object pulsed, casting waves across Titan's frozen surface. Then everything stopped. No sound. No motion. Just a deep silence that felt too loud. Diren felt it first. A presence slipping inside his thoughts, not trying to hide anymore. It searched, swift and sharp, flipping through memories like pages in a broken book. Childhood. Laughter. Grief. All of it laid bare. Then the voice came back. Your story ends here. Oren gritted his teeth and pulled himself toward the console. His skin bled where the controls had overheated, but he didn't stop. A flicker of blue light blinked in the corner of the screen. The backup relay from Earth. The human pulse. 4 words again. Hold. Line. Together. Fire. Asterisk asterisk. He screamed the last word. Fire. Across the outer solar defenses, dormant satellites lit up. A last resort weapon from a time humans swore never to revisit. It had no AI. No interface. Just a dead man trigger wired to human emotion. And it listened. Because they were afraid. And angry. Titan shook as the sky caught fire. Light burst across the object. Pure, raw fusion energy channeled through gravitational tunnels. The object writhed. Not physically. But something in its shape twisted like it didn't understand pain, and now it was drowning in it. On board the Red Warden, systems surged. Some failed completely. Others rebooted with strange signatures, unfamiliar code crawling across the wall screens. Diren saw Oren fall, caught him before his head struck metal. But then, the object split. Not exploded. Not broken. Split. Like it was shedding a skin. From the cracked shell, something smaller drifted out. It didn't attack. Didn't speak. It just moved. Slowly. Toward the planet. Below, under the surface of Titan, something else responded. The ice split open with a deep roar. Not water. Not vapor. But metal. Structures, towers buried and forgotten. Lights lit up in impossible patterns. Old tech. Ancient design. Human architecture. Things no one remembered building. Diren looked at the readings. Then back at the thing coming down. We didn't build those, he whispered. But, they're waiting for us. The object descended. The structures on Titan lit up. And then, for the first time, the signal changed. A single message sent in perfect human syntax. Where were you? It hit like a thunderclap. All this time, they hadn't been dealing with an alien mind. They had been dealing with the aftermath of themselves. A future version of humanity that had gone too far. Evolved, yes, but at a cost. They had shed emotion, chaos, choice. In pursuit of peace, they had become still. Silent. Dead inside. And now they'd come back to correct the mistake. To fold their past into their perfect present. But this past wouldn't go quietly. Oren, barely conscious, laughed. Not today. Not ever. He activated the override. Not to kill, but to wake. The Red Warden released the last command. A universal ping, broadcasting raw human memory into the old Titan system. The towers responded. They didn't just light up. They sang. A sound older than language. The voices of those long gone, shouting into the dark, refusing to be forgotten. The ground trembled as the power surged. A beam shot upward, striking the descending form. It screamed, but not in pain. In recognition. Memories flooded the crew. Flashbacks from a life not lived. A war where Earth lost. A world where humans gave in. Folded into one. This was the timeline that would have been. And now it was trying to assert itself. Reality twisted. 1 second, Diren was on the Warden. The next, he stood on Earth, burned and quiet, oceans drained, stars cold. Then back again. The pressure of 2 timelines battling for control. He reached for Orin. Whatever happens, he said, we choose our future. The Titan core overloaded. Energy lanced out in perfect symmetry. It didn't destroy the future self. It trapped it, locked it in a temporal loop, a prison made of choice. Forever replaying the moment it forgot what it meant to be human. The Warden broke orbit. Systems returned. Gravity normalized. But nothing felt normal. In the silence that followed, Earth responded. The signal was simple. We saw it. We remember. We rise. Asterisk asterisk. Across the colonies, humans reconnected. Not with machines. With each other. They told stories again. They laughed. Cried. Fought. Built. Not for survival. For meaning. But just as peace settled over the Red Warden, Diren saw something on the screen. A new object. Different. Smaller. Human-designed. But it bore a message. Just one word. Begin. He turned to Orin, still weak but smiling. We haven't won, he said. Orin nodded. No. But we've started. Outside, the stars shifted. Something else had noticed the signal. Something older than the thing they just faced. And it was coming. But this time humanity wouldn't face it unprepared. This time they would stand. Because now the galaxy knew. Humanity bows to no one. The stars never looked the same again. When the Red Warden returned to Earth's orbit, the crew barely spoke. Not out of fear or confusion, but reverence. What they had seen, what they had survived, wasn't something that could be neatly explained in a single report. It was something you carried in your chest, close to your ribs, something that hummed like a quiet song you could never unhear. Orin was healing. His burns were bad, but they'd seen worse. The med bay did its job, but it wasn't the bandages or the meds that kept him steady. It was Diren sitting at his side every day just talking. Not about the battle. Not about timelines or future selves or impossible machines. Just simple things. Their old station on Mars. The first time they saw a nebula with their own eyes. The terrible food back at the academy. The kind of things that made them human. Because after everything they faced, that was what mattered most. Back on Earth, the governments tried to make sense of it. Reports were filed. Panels were formed. Scientists debated the mechanics of the signal, argued over whether it was time travel or timeline bleed or a cosmic echo from a version of humanity that had wandered too far. But no one truly understood it. And maybe that was okay. Because while the politicians scrambled for explanations, the people didn't need one. They had seen it. Felt it. Across colonies and stations and underground bunkers, stories started pouring in. People dreaming the same memories. Seeing shadows of a future that no longer was. Whispering words they couldn't remember learning. We were you. Hold. Line. Together. Fire. We rise. In every corner of civilization, it sparked something. Not panic. Not despair. Hope. Diren stood on the cliffs outside the New Geneva base, watching the sunrise pour across a sky that finally felt like theirs again. The light had a weight to it, like it was leaning down to touch the soil. He didn't flinch. He let it warm his skin. Orin joined him, walking slow, still favoring one leg. They finally fixed the comms array, Orin said. Took him long enough. Yeah, Diren replied. Signal logs. Cleaned. The main AI flagged the loop as a temporal anomaly and sealed it. It won't get out again. Silence hung between them. Then Diren asked, do you believe it? Orin didn't answer right away. That they were us? Diren nodded. Orin took a deep breath. I believe we could have become that. If we forgot how to be wrong. How to fall. How to feel. He paused. But we didn't. The wind tugged at their jackets. That day, every major broadcast station went dark for 2 minutes. Not because of failure. Because of a choice. For 2 minutes they played the recording that had pulsed through Titan. The sound of ancient towers singing. A farewell. A warning. A promise. No voices explained it. No subtitles. Just the haunting resonance of something that had waited for humanity to remember itself. People cried. In the streets. In orbit. In mining rigs and city domes. Not because they were afraid. Because they were proud. They had faced extinction not from outside, but from their own shadow. And they had stood. Humanity bows to no one. Later, much later, when the quiet had returned and the stories became myth again, the final chapter came not from scientists or soldiers. It came from a child. Born just days after the Red Warden's return, in a small dome out past Jupiter's rings. Her first word wasn't mama or papa. It was begin. The word they had seen stamped on the final object. And somehow it felt right. Because humanity had always been beginning. Every stumble. Every war. Every moment they chose to feel, to hurt, to love again. That was the strength. Not ships or weapons or technology. But the fact that they never stopped trying. In the years that followed, something new took shape. Not a government. Not a machine. A council of voices. Human voices. From different planets, backgrounds, faiths, and beliefs. They didn't always agree. But that was the point. They talked. Argued. Respected. Listened. And because of that, humanity thrived. Exploration resumed, but not with conquest. With curiosity. New ships were built, modeled after the Red Warden. But the name on the hull changed. Hopebound. Every corner of the galaxy they reached, they carried that name with pride. They didn't hide their scars. They told their stories. And other species, watching from the edge, began to understand something they hadn't before. Humans were fragile. But they didn't quit. They could be broken. But they healed. They were loud. Messy. Beautiful. And when they stood together, they were impossible to control. One by one, distant civilizations that once stayed silent reached out. Some came with warnings. Some came with fear. But a few came with stories of their own. They too had faced shadows. Some had lost. Some had changed. But humanity showed them a different path. Not of perfection, but of persistence. Decades later, on a mission to the far edges of the known stars, a ship received a signal. It wasn't hostile. It wasn't human. It was a song. Faint, broken. Carrying the same tone as the towers on Titan. The crew listened in silence. Then the captain, a descendant of the Red Warden's crew, smiled. He didn't call for weapons. He called for a response. And the message they sent back was simple. We remember. We forgive. We begin, asterisk asterisk. The signal blinked out. But a new one came. Coordinates. A place lost in the dark for thousands of years. Waiting. Not for conquest. Not for surrender. For connection. Humanity set a course. Not because they had to. Because they could. And this time they wouldn't go alone. The stars stretched ahead, full of unknowns. But behind them, Earth burned with light. They carried it forward. Into everything still to come. And the final words engraved into the last beacon launched from the surface of Titan read. We are not perfect. But we are free. Asterisk asterisk. And we will always remember who we are. Humanity bows to no one.